Hi, and welcome back to GCSE History lessons. In this lesson, we will look at the invasion of Czechoslovakia. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to retell the events of the invasion of Czechoslovakia and analyse its short and long-term impacts. You should remember from previous lessons that Czechoslovakia, under new reformist leadership, was rapidly liberated from strict Moscow-style communism in 1968. You should also remember that Czechoslovakia was extremely important to the USSR, being the most industrial and developed nation in Eastern Europe. It was part of the Warsaw Pact and sat in the middle of Europe, bordering West Germany, which were under US influence, not Russian. Yet despite being part of the Warsaw Pact, Czechoslovakia had avoided having Soviet troops stationed within its borders, unlike Hungary. From last lesson, you will remember that a special congress was scheduled for September 1968, where Czech leaders would discuss the future of the Communist Party in Czech politics. The upcoming special congress worried Brezhnev and many other European governments, who saw a threat to the legitimacy of Communist Party control. Hardline leaders in Poland, Bulgaria, and East Germany feared uncontrolled reformism seeping into their countries. In June, the Kremlin ordered Warsaw Pact troops to maneuver into Czechoslovakian territory as a thinly veiled threat to Prague. These scare tactics were designed to send a message to Dubcek, stop the reform and call off the special Congress meeting. But the threat backfired. On June 27th, a statement in a Prague newspaper titled 2000 Words, authored by Ludvík Vaculík and supported by many intellectuals, warned that Czechoslovakia's recent reforms were being threatened by foreign old powers, and that Czechoslovakians should be willing to defend the reforms if necessary. This convinced Moscow that the threat of counter-revolution was real, and plans were made to invade Czechoslovakia if the Special Congress, which was now scheduled for August the 26th, was not cancelled, and if it did not let Soviet troops in. At the end of July, in face-to-face meetings, Brezhnev gave Dubcek a final chance to cancel the Congress. Dubcek later told a friend, "I just try to smile at Brezhnev as he shouts at me. I say, yes, I agree, and then I come home and do nothing." When the agreements were not honoured, the USSR Politburo met on August 17th and confirmed the decision to invade. On the night of August 20th, Warsaw Pact troops invaded Czechoslovakia. They met no resistance from the Czechoslovakian army, which wasn't even mobilized. Apparently, Dubcek had not believed that Brezhnev would actually invade. By mid-morning, Dubcek and the entire executive committee were on their way to KGB camps. Dubcek was devastated. "I have devoted my whole life to cooperation with the Soviet Union, and they have done this to me. It is my personal tragedy," he said. Now let's look at the immediate and long-term consequences of the invasion. In the short term, Brezhnev's invasion of Czechoslovakia went perfectly, but it was the politics he misjudged. Brezhnev assumed that the hardliners in Czechoslovakia would welcome Soviet troops and therefore legitimize the invasion, but they didn't. In fact, most of the hardliners wouldn't even talk to the Russians until Dubcek and his colleagues were brought back. Across the country, a general strike and passive resistance ground the country to a halt. Czech students shouted at Russian Red Army troops, and some graffitied Russian tanks with swastikas and messages such as "Ivan, go home." Dubcek was forced by the Soviets to sign a document legitimizing the invasion and was sent home to reverse the reforms he had created. Over the next few months, Czech resistance to Russia continued. First on January 6, 1969, when hundreds of thousands attended the funeral of Jan Pallas, a student who set himself on fire in protest to the invasion. And again on March 28, 1969, when Czechoslovakia defeated the Soviet Union in ice hockey, sparking mass demonstrations and feeding Brezhnev's anger. In April 1969, Gustav Husak was made party secretary of Czechoslovakia, and in June 1970, Dubcek was stripped of all his titles, including party membership. In the long term, the invasion spelled out the Breznev Doctrine. Explained in the Russian newspaper Pravda, this was the new reality in Eastern Europe under Brezhnev, that although national leaders could determine their country's path of development, they must damage neither socialism in their own country nor the worldwide workers' movement, and, importantly, the USSR would decide when those obligations had been broken. The invasion and the Breznev Doctrine led Albania to completely split with Moscow. It left the Warsaw Pact, while Romania stayed in the pact but refused to join the invasion of Czechoslovakia. Perhaps the largest political consequence of the invasion actually occurred outside of Europe entirely. The new idea that the USSR might invade and force countries to conform to its brand of socialism shocked communist China, which had a very different idea of communism to Russia. For Beijing, the USSR now posed as great a threat as the USA did. Over the next decades, it even began to build factories deep within its interior in case Russia invaded, and a build-up of troops on the Russia-China border showed just how deep the Sino-Soviet split had become. The invasion was also an ideological defeat for communism. Just like the Hungarian invasion, the USSR had shown in Czechoslovakia that its empire was not an empire by invitation, but that it had to force its allies to remain within its sphere of influence. This was especially true in 1968 because, although he was a reformer, Dubcek was still a genuine believer in the Soviet model before the invasion. Even Andrei Sakharov, father of the Soviet H-bomb, began to speak out against USSR and lamented the death of reformed socialism, while communist supporters in France denounced the USSR for the first time ever. So, to summarise what we've learned today, the invasion of Czechoslovakia came after Dubcek and the Czechoslovakian leadership ignored threats and calls from the USSR to cancel reforms, and especially the Special Congress, which would cast doubt over the legitimacy of the Communist Party. Soviet troops invaded Czechoslovakia on August 20th, 1968. Short-term consequences of the invasion included resistance by Czech people and leadership, and the reversal of Czech reforms to bring it back in line with Moscow. Long-term consequences of the invasion included an ideological defeat for communism, as well as various splits in the communist bloc, especially between Russia and China. This brings us to the end of Topic 2. Next lesson we will summarise Topic 2 and look at some exam questions on the content covered in the past 6 lessons. Thanks for watching. Feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time on GCSE History Lessons.